supposed to. So we are now recording. So welcome everybody. This is Sturgis Library's digital presentation with the Food Forest Initiative. Before we get going tonight, we want to say a big thank you to the American Library Association, specifically their Sustainable Communities Grant, who were able to fund this program and several other programs. So big thanks to them for helping us spread the word about all the different great ways you can garden and be kind to your land. And a huge thanks to the Food Forest Initiative, who are very kind to share their knowledge and their time with us tonight. And I hope you all enjoy the program. Two things to notice, the chat is open, so if you want to send questions through there, we can answer them hopefully towards the end. And if you have any technical issues, feel free to address them towards me and I can check them out. And that's about all you need to know from me. I'm going to turn this over to Rand, and I hope you all enjoy.
Well, welcome everybody. I wish we could all see each other. At a normal Food Forest Initiative workday, we have a potluck or a bag lunch and we get to work together. So we're going to present about perennial food growing, but my job is to introduce you to who we are, how we work briefly, and then get on to some other presenters in our group. So I'm going to share my screen with you. This may take a moment. So can you all see that? I hope so. So we're the Food Forest Initiative of Cape Cod. We are bioregional, non-hierarchical. We work together, come up with ideas as a team, and get out and do projects. And we also are backyard gardeners ourselves, all of us very experimental. Today I was out planting pears, tupelos, inkberries, blueberries. Our roots are in permaculture and restoration agriculture, and especially perennial plants that give us food and help to build soils and build complete ecosystems and capture carbon. How do we work? We typically hatch ideas, as I said before, and get out on the ground. Our mission statement is to strengthen Cape Cod's diversity and food security through public plantings and educational actions. So this is our first project that we did at Lighthouse Charter School. We put this garden on the ground in about an afternoon with cardboard over grass and wood chips and compost. That garden is there. You can see it at Lighthouse Charter School. We planted perennials along the edges of it, and we planted some perennial vegetables that came to us from Edible Landscapes of Cape Cod, you're going to hear from tonight. And then we planted some annuals too, and we grew potatoes and gave them to food pantry. And so that's the kind of thing we do. This year we did a power lines project on a much larger scale. And then this is a picture of the power lines project, our planting day back in May. I want to zoom through this so that you can hear from the others. But this shows the kind of thing that you might expect on a work day with us. So we're always kind of talking as we work, sharing knowledge, sharing our experiences from our backyards. And the project, all of our projects, we try to do work towards citizen science and getting young people involved. So this is a song that I like, and it's about the Irish diggers from the 1700s. We come in peace, they said, to dig and sow. We come to work the land in common and to make the waste ground grow. This earth divided we will make whole, so it can be a common treasury for all. And in the picture you can see this particular day, we're moving wood chips so that we can plant at the entrance to our Power Lines project a special pollinator garden. And we'll be working on that as an ongoing project in the next season. Now, I wanted to make a mention. We live on Wampanoag ground, Wampanoag land on Cape Cod. It came to my attention. There is a indigenous group, a global indigenous group that wrote a document called Whitewashed Hope, which is critical of the things that we do in some ways, and critical of the idea of regenerative agriculture, or not the idea, but some of the lacking of vision behind it. So I'll quote from this. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around here, and I can't read it. You can probably read it. But the important thing I wanted to call attention to is this text from Robin Wall Kimmerer, an essay that she wrote called "The Serviceberry," and you can read it for yourselves because I can't see it because of the way my screen is set up. Oh no, I can. To replenish the possibility of mutual flourishing for birds and berries and people, we need an economy that shares the gifts of the earth, following the lead of our oldest teachers, the plants. And I think that that's something we do. We're following the lead of the plants, and you'll see that with the presenters today. I found this quote from Earl Mills, who's a Wampanoag elder and chief, and I think it relates to the work that we do. He wrote, "My father always set a match to his lands to clear away the old, make way for new growth. The blueberries are waiting underneath for their time." So here are our presenters. You're going to hear first from Dave Skandura and Marina Matos of Edible Landscapes of Cape Cod about some of their favorite perennial food plants. After that, you'll hear from Tom Fettig about tree grafting and backyard fruit growing, and some permaculture principles like plant guilds, building communities of plants that grow naturally together. After that, you'll get some more permaculture examples from gardener and poet Kristen Knowles, who will touch on social permaculture and keeping chickens and ducks. And after that, you'll hear from Clara McClarty and Sandy McClarty, who are backyard plant experimenters on the delight of really cooking and eating different plants and feeding a family. So it's unusual. We have 4 presenters and we have to go through a lot of material. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat. And I hope that we'll have a little time at the end of the presentations to answer your questions. So I'm going to pass on to Edible Landscapes of Cape Cod, Marina Matos and Dave Skandura.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
Can everybody see our screen?
We are screen sharing.
Yes.
We are screen sharing?
Mhm.
Interesting, because I can't really see it. I do that. Or maybe I go to this mode. There we go. Is that better? Thumbs up for me. Actually, I can't see anyone. I have everyone. Okay,
Yep,
thumbs up.
okay.
Thank you. All right, here we go. So we're sort of taking a snippet from one of a presentation that we've given over the past couple of years specifically about edible perennial plants. So we're gonna try to cram like a 2-hour presentation into 10 minutes. Good luck. So why edible perennials? Low maintenance. Generally plant them once and they can live for many years. Many perennials are no dig, so less soil disturbance, which means more carbon is sequestered in long-term storage as soil humus and perennial plant parts. Can provide other crops for a farm in the shoulder seasons and extending the harvest season. Can provide other functions in a garden or farm, such as insect habitat, ground covers, erosion control, hedges, windbreaks, or mulching plants. Root systems of perennial plants, especially trees, can catch and store water and nutrients that might otherwise be washed away. Generally more resilient than annual plants because of their root systems that are established. Challenges with perennial plants. They can take a long time to establish before harvesting. plant diseases and viruses, once they get in a perennial plant, are kind of there. So versus an annual plant, you just do it again next year and kind of refresh. Many of the flavors can be pretty strong and foreign to many folks. I personally know from experience that the more that I eat new plants and the odd flavors, I get adjusted to it, and I enjoy them more. The first time you might try something, it might be a little strong, but
And sometimes there's also a way of cooking it that we just don't know about because they're not conventional plants.
Yep. They can be challenged to grow them in an annual farm situation, because annual farms are very focused like on, tilling. And so it's kind of a different approach completely. They can be pricey and very hard to get your hands on. That's been our experience. They can be trickier to start from seed. For non-land owning folks like ourselves, it might seem like a risky investment to spend money on perennial plants, because if you don't have long-term land tenure, why would you do that? But unless you're crazy and obsessed with perennial plants. Aside from the usual suspects, most people don't know about a lot of these perennial plants, so there's currently not much of a market for them. Some can become weeds when not tended to. Some inspiring resources. These books are great in terms of talking about cool, fun, edible perennials. So usual suspects. These are the kind of perennial plants that most people know about and ask us about. Blueberry, raspberry, blackberry, apple, pear, peach, plum, the huge. And then there's a funny, these are plants most people don't know are edible, but are common in our New England landscapes. Kuza dogwood berries, choke cherry, the native cherries, service berries, rosa rugosa, rose hips, grapes, Solomon seal, honey locust.
Oh, daylilies isn't on there.
Daylily.
Daylilies, yep.
That might be on the next slide. Eastern white pine makes a good tea. So we're often a lot of times we might do a consult and say, oh, you actually have edible plants there. You got plants there. You can eat those, But some hosta shoots, they're tasty. More plants that most people don't know are edible, but commonly found in New England landscapes. Rose of Sharon, flowers are edible. Daylily. Many people have these plants. Many people have seen these plants and probably don't even really know that they're edible. Sheep sorrel, common weed in the garden. Spiderwort, wintergreen, autumn olive, bada bing, bada boom. So now on to our top 30 perennial plants, which again, we would normally spend a lot more time on each one. We're going to have Marina talk about in more detail on each one as we get there. We have a handful of plants that Marina is going to talk about in more detail, but otherwise I'm just going to kind of whiz through these. Yam vine, Dioscorea batatas, that's on your list.
Yep. So this one, it's called air potato sometimes as well. It makes these aerial tubers that actually grow on the vine. They taste like a cross between a potato and cassava or yucca root, if you've ever had that. They're really delicious. We've had them just roasted and boiled, right? And it was just amazing. It also does make a yam underground, but it's sometimes 4 feet deep. So we haven't really harvested that. But the air potatoes, they can take, a few years to really get going. But the harvest we've had recently have been really, really good. So that's one that's definitely worth it and tasty.
Just got to give it something to climb on. It's a vine. There's another picture. Skirret. Clara is going to talk about skirret at the end, so we'll skip over that. There's a roasted skirret, kind of like skirret fries. It's basically a perennial parsnip. Sea kale are one of our absolute favorites. That's on the list for you.
Yeah, so recently it just came up, so still very small shoots from the ground. We've had it as kale chips recently. That was really good. We've had it just cooked, especially when it's younger. When it's older, the leaves tend to get a little tougher, which we haven't really done much with, but it'd be interesting to try, making chips or cooking it later on. That's kind of what it looks like right now.
This is the best edible time for it when it's making the young broccoli florets.
Yeah. And it also makes really bigger than usual kale flowers, and they smell like honey, very fragrant, great for a salad topping. And it also has these edible seed pods that are pretty juicy. So this is a really nice edible that's also very ornamental.
Sea kale. Turkish rocket. Is Clara's gonna talk about Turkish rocket.
Those are the florets when they're really young.
Super tasty. J chokes. Clara's gonna talk about that.
Oh, one thing I was gonna mention about the J chokes, which I don't know if Clara is that we fermented it. Because J chokes usually get a bad rap for making people fart. They're usually called fartichokes too. And so what we've actually done is we lacto fermented it, so just with salt and water and whatever else you want to throw in there for spices. And if you let it go for at least a few weeks, it actually helps break down the inulin, which is what will give you gas in it. And we've had pretty good luck with this, so we haven't noticed any gas using this method. So if that's something that would bother someone who has more of a sensitive stomach, we definitely recommend that. Otherwise, they're just delicious roasted if you don't mind the gas.
Groundnut, Apios americana. This is a native edible tuber. I don't think that's on Clara's list. Needs something. It's a vining plant, so it kind of will climb all over whatever's around it. Tends to move around, so wherever you plant it, it might show up 5 feet away from it, and the next feet another 5 feet away. It kind of travels underground. But it's quite tasty. It's kind of like a bean crossed with a potato, the tubers, when you eat them. There's the flower on the left, a nice legume flower, and then just us planting it on the right. Sweet Sicily. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this one, the whole plant is edible, and it really tastes like licorice or fennel.
We call it fennel of the woods.
Yeah, it has this fern-like foliage, so it's really, really nice looking, loves the shade. We really like those the seed pods on the right. They're the really young seed pods, and we've actually frozen them, and they're like a nice little snack, especially for kids.
It's a little licorice candy.
Yeah, our daughter really likes it, but she's also just been eating it straight from the plant right now. So
all of it. Whole plant is edible.
Yep.
Fuki. We've been having trouble. This one is a Japanese perennial vegetable, and we're still trying to get this thing to taste good.
It's a really, there's just a very specific way to cook it. And this is when the leaves have come up. This is probably around June or so. But the flowers are up right now, and the trick is to get them before the flower buds open, which we haven't been able to do. We've missed it these last couple
that's when the
years.
flower opens right there.
Yeah, so that's already too late.
You got to get it before they open, and then you cook them up.
Yep, and all of that is actually the flower. Those aren't the leaves. The leaves emerge a little bit later.
But it's quite an ornamental plant regardless. It likes wet shade. If you got wet shade, Fuki will crush it there.
And the stems are also edible, which we haven't tried, and apparently the leaves too. I just found that out.
We got to figure out a way to make this taste better.
Yeah.
Rock cress is a great edible flower for rocky walls and stuff like that.
Just a cressy
nice
taste.
Cressy, mustardy flavor. Water celery, I think that's on your list, honey.
Yep. We just use this like you would celery in soups or salads. If you get it while it's younger too, the stems and the leaves are a little bit more tender. But if it's not young and if it's later in the season, if you just cook it, it's fine. It's a little bit stronger than celery in taste.
We got American spikenard, a great shrubby plant for the shade. It dies back to the ground, and then it turns into a nice looking shrubby looking plant with edible berries. Egyptian walking onion. Claire is going to talk about that. Sorry, Maple's trying to get in here and the door's kind of locked. Elephant garlic, we've been having a lot of fun with. I wish I had a shot of, so we actually treat this like a leek, a perennial leek. We cut this down at the ground level and leave the bulb in the ground, and then you basically have a perennial leek elephant garlic. Elderberry, a great easy one as far as a shrub is concerned, very adaptable. I'm probably coming up to 10 minutes. We're probably coming up to 10 minutes. All I can see right now is you, Rand. So give me one of these things. Okay. Elderberry. Pawpaw is a great landscape tree.
Oh, we should talk about elderberry. Actually, we made not a mead, but technically a soda from the elderflowers last year, and that was amazing. It was just elderflowers, honey, water, and I think I used lemon peel, and that was really, really amazing. So that can be used in a lot of beverages and teas. It's used in that popular liqueur Saint Germain's. So that's kind of the taste that you get if you make a, fermented beverage from it. And then the berries we just use like berries, make syrup. So they just need to be cooked. Otherwise, if you eat a large amount, you can get some mild poisoning.
Not a
No big
raw,
deal.
heat out of hand type berry, even
Yeah.
though I do sometimes. What can I say? Pawpaw, we're just gonna whiz through these. Does well. That's our pawpaws that we grew a couple years ago. And actually, I just checked on the pawpaws. They're all 3 of them now are flowering. So now I shouldn't have to borrow pollen from Christy Cap.
But you do have to do a little bit of just hand pollination with it. Anyway.
You might have to hand pollinate, but it's kind of fun. It's a whole process. It's worth it when you taste that fruit. You're like, it was absolutely worth it to hand pollinate that. Chinese chestnuts, we love. They do really well on the Cape. They crush it. And but the drag is they got spiky burrs on their outer husks. So don't step on those with bare feet. Ouchie. Korean pine nut, we have growing. It's only 3 or so years old. Very small still. Actually, no, we have another one that's like 7 years old. But
apparently they can take up to 40 years to make, the
up to
cones with the nuts.
So we're just waiting around for that one. Fennel, Claire is going to talk about. Mayapple is a great shade-loving ground cover-ish with edible fruits when they're fully ripe. If you don't eat them when they're fully ripe, they're somewhat mildly toxic. So you got to make sure they're fully ripe. But when they are fully ripe, it is an amazing tropical tasting fruit. Solomon seal, young shoots and the roots are edible. Shoots are cooked like asparagus. Ostrich fern, the fiddlehead fern. Fiddleheads cooked and eaten. Good King Henry is a really fun spinach.
Yeah, it's a cooking spinach, so it's not really that fun to have it raw.
It's gross raw.
Yeah, it has a lot of that white powder that spinach has. And yeah, we just cook it. And then apparently the seed, what you see there, I guess the seed pods are also very tasty when you just fry that whole, like what you see right now. It's supposed to be very tasty.
Hardy kiwi crushes it. Does really well, just needs really strong support. It's been known to collapse whatever structure it climbs on, so you got to really give it something really sturdy. Beach plum needs no introduction. It's native here. It does well. Only drag is it fruits every 2 to 3 years. Horseradish does great. Easy to grow. What could be better? Horseradish.
Yep, we potted some up. I think it was previous winter, and we were just having the leaves that were coming up indoors. It was a nice.
Yeah, it's called forcing. So if you dig up a lot of plants, you can do this. You dig up the roots, you bring it indoors in like winter time, and it'll start to grow in a windowsill, and then you have some greens to eat. Wintergreen as a ground cover in the shade. Okay. Wild strawberry. Violet. Wild thicket bean. Hardy ginger. That's it. All right. There we go. Stop share.
Okay. Well, I'm going to now introduce Tom Fedig, who's right next to me here, and we're going to screen share his presentation. Okay, I'm going to
Scoot over.
I'm going to scoot over.
All right, I can't see me. Can you guys see the screen? Can you see the screen, Chris?
I can see Sasha.
Can you see me? Can you hear me? Are we
You're all good.
okay?
Good.
I'm gonna go with that. So I wanted to talk to you tonight about trying to include maybe fruit and nut trees in your landscape. We built our house in 2004, and I had no intention of growing any food in my yard outside of a little garden. And then I read a book, and we started to experiment, and now we have apples, pears, nectarines, peaches, plums, apricots, grapes, raspberries, blackberries, gooseberries, blueberries, persimmon, elderberry, serviceberry, hackberry, beach plum, cherry, jostaberry, pawpaw, almond, hazelnut, walnut, chestnut, strawberry, and I'm sure I forgot a bunch of stuff. And we have 30 chickens and 8 ducks. I just want to encourage people not to be scared about taking on the, if you want to feel like you can't do this, growing food like this is not some kind of like weird hippie magic. Permaculture is not something that's like for people who think too much about this stuff. It's very practical. It's very easy to incorporate into your life. And regardless, we're doing what we're doing on just under a little bit of an acre, but regardless of the space you have in your yard, you have plenty of space to do stuff,
It says press play, Tom, so it goes full screen.
Where? Oh, I'm sorry, we're having a little bit that.
Yeah.
Oh,
There
that's
you
probably
go.
better. Okay, and then how do I move the screen along? Does anybody know that?
Is it the space bar?
Let's try. Yes. Okay. So these are pictures from our yard. We plant most of our trees in tree guilds, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, is just a guild is just a collection of plants that grow in concert with one another, and they support and help each other. And generally what we try to do is the guild is anchored with a fruit or a nut tree. And then we figure out what the mature tree is going to look like, what kind of space it's going to occupy. And we make a bed around it, and we throw down inoculated wood chips that have mycelium in them. So they begin to grow mushroom, and then we put a ground cover in, which generally is like strawberry. Around the outside of the beds, we put bulbs. The daffodils are blooming right now. It looks very nice, but it has 2 functions in a guild. One is that grass doesn't, for some reason, grass does not like bulb plants. So it'll deter grass from growing into your mulch. But also it gets pollinators used to coming to the place where your tree is. If your tree hasn't flowered yet, you put some early flowering bulbs, it gets pollinators used to being in the neighborhood, used to being in the area, to help pollinate your tree later on when it does flower. We also plant pest deterrents, anything in the alum family, chives, garlic, onion, any real aromatic herbs like fennel, catmint, any kind of the mint family too. And that, it doesn't stop pests, but little critters don't necessarily like it. A lot of bugs will be deterred by it, but also it's another beneficial source of pollen for pollinators, which is going to help your tree. We also plant nutrient accumulators, and those tend to be deeper rooted perennial plants like dock or comfrey, especially comfrey. We use that a lot. That can have a taproot that goes down really low into the soil and pulls up minerals and nutrients that it stores in their leaves, because you can just take that plant and you can rip the leaves off, leaving the roots in the ground, and rip it into tiny pieces and throw it as a green manure onto your trees. And it acts like a mulch, but it also, all those stored minerals are going to, as the plant decomposes, it's going to put those back into the top layer of the soil, where the feeder roots of a lot of fruit and nut trees occupy that space. So it's a way to, give minerals that may be lacking in the soil access to the roots of your tree. We also plant a lot of leguminous plants, beans and peas. Like we plant sweet pea, we plant a whole bunch of edible beans. There's Siberian pea shrub. And if you're unfamiliar with what a nitrogen fixer is, they are nitrogen fixers. They can take nitrogen from the air and store it on nodules in their roots. There's bacteria that lives in their roots that form these nodes or nodules. And when the plant either dies, winter dies, or it's harvested, if you leave the roots in the ground, then that nitrogen is released. And again, the tree has access to it. It's a way to sort of keep down the need for any sort of fertilizer. Yeah, if there's any, there's also, we use a lot of salt hay and seaweed as mulch for our trees. A lot of the minerals that get washed off the land end up in our waters around here. It's an easy, free source of nutrients for your garden and your fruit and nut trees. And if you're worried about the salt content, you can just compost it for a little bit before you put it on. I put it on directly and it have never had any problems with it. Another benefit of that is that weed seeds don't find a home in seaweed. Although I will say a lot of that garlic mustard that is everywhere now seems to like it quite a bit. So if you're thinking about planting a young tree, there's a few things you might want to consider. Unlike landscape trees, which are generally planted for visual ideas, we want to well, actually, I'll go to the picture right now because Rand's giving me that look. So the first picture that I just switched from was me with some scion wood. I'm grafting an apple tree onto some rootstock that we have planted at the high school garden. And these are the tools that I use when I'm grafting. Most of the trees that you're going to buy from a nursery, I would almost say all, but I'm not exactly sure, are grafted trees that they have a root system that is cloned for very specific reasons. And then the variety of whatever fruit you want is grafted onto them. I learned about grafting in a permaculture course I took. And I think, so there I am putting I think that's Williams Pride, if I'm not, which is a variety of apple, onto a rootstock. Honestly, I'm not sure what kind of rootstock, but so rootstocks are generally bred for specific characteristics that they have: disease resistance, their ability to contend with certain weather aspects, the environment of where you are. But by and large, they're bred for their ability to control how big the tree is going to grow. Most of the trees we plant in our yard are dwarf or semi-dwarf fruit trees, just because I don't want to get on a ladder anymore to harvest fruit, but it makes And you know, the drawback to that, oh, there's the graft completed. So what we're doing is you're taking, scion wood is just taking a cutting from a tree of the variety you want, and you're joining it onto a root system that's already established, or that that you bought, and you join them together and a tree grows, and it's amazing. So if you're unfamiliar with this, like if you plant the seed from a Macintosh apple, the tree that grows will not be a Macintosh apple. And statistically, it's probably not even going to be an edible apple. So certain varieties that people really like are worth keeping. You know, we try to grow a lot of heritage apples and a lot of old New England apples, because they, if they were specific to, if they were grown before the advent of herbicides and fungicides and insecticides, and they had built-in resistance, a lot of that DNA could get lost. So I'm trying to preserve those types of varieties of apples and pears in my yard, because if a lot of commercial agriculture grows things for ease of shipping and ease of growth, but not necessarily taste or any other characteristics that people might want to have in an apple. And I didn't necessarily think before I started doing this that there was much difference in the taste of an apple, but if you sit down to an apple tasting, you'll be amazed at how the myriad of stuff that goes on in the combination of sugar molecules in an apple or a pear. So the other thing, this is a picture of hazelnuts. These are hazelnuts drying in my basement. Yeah, so back to understanding like what you want to do is like understanding that the siting of your trees so that they have access to sun, and watching the way water moves through your landscape to make sure that your trees can get water, enough water from rainfall once they become established. And if you're really tight on space, there's ways to graft more than one variety of apples onto one tree so that you can have cross-pollination going on one tree. A lot of apple and pear trees need pollen from other apple and pear trees. A lot of the stone fruit, peaches, nectarines, apricots are self-fertile, but do much better if they have secondary pollen sources. And if you're going to buy two specific trees to pollinate one another, make sure that their flowering times sync up, because not all apple and pear and peach trees flower at the same time. Different varieties tend to flower at different times. And once a flower is open, they usually have about 72 to 96 hours to get pollen from another source if need be. So, and when you're planting a tree too, think about what the winter wind is like where you live. You know, we found here that our driveway kind of acts like a wind tunnel in January and February, and when we have really harsh winters, the trees in our front yard tend to act like they're under a lot of stress once spring comes around. Rather than putting a lot of their energy into growing fruit spurs, they throw off a lot of vegetative growth. And if you're planting new trees, you know, just certainly protect them and water them for the first couple of years. But then, you know, once they're established, you can sort of take away the watering and take away the cages, slowly do that. And because if you have irrigation on fruit and nut trees, I found it doesn't necessarily encourage them to develop a full rooting system. And I've seen instances of this. My friend has a landscape company, and a lot of the fruit trees that he cares for are very tall and spindly, but they fall over a lot during windstorms, and they're tied to the ground. All right. So we also grow a lot of fruit rands. And here's some of the mushrooms that we grow in the wood chips under our fruit trees. Here's my wife harvesting the mushrooms. Wine cap mushrooms. There's some echinacea, which you grow, hollyhocks, globe thistle. And here's my daughter doing her homework under an apple tree. She's actually at school, yes. So just the other benefit of this too really is that you can create really amazing outdoor spaces for you and your family and your community, and you can also like do a lot of repair to the soil on Cape Cod, just by having this aspect in your life. And I really would encourage anybody to please go for it. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Kristen Knowles to speak, and she's here. Kristen, can you share? Do you need to share your screen? Or no, I need to turn off my. Okay, I'm going to stop my. I'm going to mute.
Are you muted? Okay, can everybody hear me? I can't hear myself. Wait a minute. Okay, everybody can hear me? Okay. So I'm Tom's wife. All of those things you saw, which are part of our yard. It's been like a 15-year experience from planting my very first apple tree before we ever moved in to just every year we add more and more. And all of a sudden we're farmers. I guess, I'll start off with, generally my background is I grew up here. So I've a tremendous connection with the natural world. We're really lucky in that way. And we have the privilege of having our own house and yard, which it's almost an acre, and it's enormous. I'm experiencing so many friends who are looking for places to live, who've lived here for a long, long time and, are stuck. So, that's part of the social permaculture aspect that I'm going to talk about later. We call our farm Crackpot Farms because we're open to trying anything. There's so many inventive solutions to the ways to approach a lot of the challenges we face environmentally and socially. A lot of those ideas may seem like something that's way fringy. So hence the crackpot part. It's sort of tongue in cheek and, goofy and funny. And we're not really crackpots. We're pretty, we're slightly grounded people anyway. My sister-in-law in Vermont is the one who introduced us to these concepts of permaculture. Although I had already been a gardener and landscaper throughout the decade of my 20s, I had learned a lot, but I hadn't learned the ways of permaculture, which is in a lot of ways, it's so in sync with the way nature works. And I guess as somebody who was working in landscaping, I always had this feeling that like there was something missing. Like, why are we doing this over and over and over again? And, you know, there's so much input, especially with lawns, especially with fertilizers, especially with pesticides, and all of the time, all of that takes. And once I started learning about permaculture, I realized that the amount of input, you know, in the initial phase is a lot, but afterwards it's not. It's really, it's more maintenance. And then you start really harvesting, which is incredible. The first book I read about permaculture after Gaia's Garden was Paradise Lot, which is actually hilarious. And it also, in a way, addresses social permaculture. These two guys bought this house in Holyoke, Mass. It had 1/10 of an acre. The backyard was full of cement and all kinds of chunks of concrete, and it was compressed and dead. And they turned it into a food forest with over 200 species of all kinds of different plants. And they also had a water feature with harvestable food. You know, I mean, just like astonishing. And they reported how, you know, the entire like ecosystem of the environment started to change because they were attracting birds and they were attracting critters, and the biodiversity was building. And that's a wonderful story. And they're funny, very, very funny. So that's a book called Paradise Lot. And it's Paradise Lot. What did they say? The tale of two plant nerds, basically. And then, so from there, as we're doing all of this in our yard, and you know, it's trial and error, it's failure and success, and you just keep going, persevering. I went to this workshop with a woman named Starhawk. And Starhawk has been a spiritual leader, activist, social justice activist, and environmental activist for decades, like 50 years, actually, since the 1960s. And at this weekend workshop, which was called Join Mother Earth's Transition Team, she talked about the ways that we can start harnessing our own, how we can start changing the world right now on the most elemental level. And, you know, her whole thing is we're facing a shift. We know we're facing a shift. We don't know what manifestation it's going to take, but we are seeing all kinds of indicators on so many levels. And so what can we do right now to start healing the earth and to start healing our culture? And permaculture encompasses both of those things. And for her, that is the primary thing, because we need to heal our land. And so one of the takeaways from my workshop with Starhawk was how she talked about the edges, the richness of the edges. And when I say edges in the environment, I mean where the water meets the riverbank, or the darkness, where the darkness of the forest meets the sun, at the edge of the meadow, the place where the deers congregate, where the deers, did I really say that? Where the deer congregate to eat the most succulent, you know, herbs and things, grasses growing at the edge of the meadow, where the hawks are flying overhead and finding their food, and the different species of birds looking for grains and bugs. These are the richest places. And also, you know, even on the sides of highways, they say that the foliage is the most amazing. because they have the runoff of all the water all the time. And so those trees are the healthiest in some ways. So like the edges of where things meet. And that also applies to social permaculture, because especially right now where we are, oh my gosh, how could we not apply this to the way that things are going right now? In social permaculture, this is manifested in the parts of our country where there's the most diversity and the most conflict, the most poverty and the most tremendous wealth, which actually we would have living side by side, which actually, we could apply to Cape Cod as well. There's no question that these aspects, dynamics have an effect on the entire social culture and the economy. And they serve to reinforce division in the classes. And clearly, many aspects of these microcultures need to change in order for health to be restored to our society on many levels. Another huge takeaway for me is that when I am feeling hopeless and helpless and like I can't affect change whatsoever, there's a thing called critical mass, which I hadn't known about before, which is a actual percentage based on scientific data, which shows us that between the once the population reaches between 27 and 32%, with everyone on board with the same idea, the whole culture starts to shift. And it's a really, really slow process. But we saw that happen with cigarettes over a really long campaign. We saw that happen with LGBTQ rights over a long time. And social change does take a long time. But, that is absolutely something that is it once I knew that there was a number that you could reach, it was like, yes, we can actually do this. And I thought to myself, all of this reminds me of that quote by Margaret Mead, which is, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. I have seen that happen. I have seen the shift. I have seen people create change. People in our own community who sat around a table one day and said, this is what we're going to do. And like the Clothesline Project, which became international. It's possible. It is absolutely possible. So the last thing, I guess I want to tell you about 3 movies you need to see. The first one is Kiss the Ground. It's about everything. I mean, you really need to see this in the global perspective. Another one is Fantastic Fungi, which is by Paul Stamets, who's the utmost mycological expert in the United States, if not internationally. It's amazingly informative, and it will blow your mind as far as what fungus, mushrooms, mycological entities mean to us globally as a planet for our existence. And then the next one is Biggest Little Farm. And Biggest Little Farm is the thing that inspired me to get ducks, because in Biggest Little Farm, they had an orchard. They were having a terrible problem with snails. We have a terrible problem with plum curculios, with Japanese beetles, with the beetles that infest our raspberries. I could go on and on. Squash bugs, cucumber beetles, asparagus beetles. But you know what ducks love is bugs. And they walk around your yard all day and they eat them. And the whole time they're doing it, they're also fertilizing your yard. And they're funny as hell. So while you're out there doing your work, they're following you around. And just as a side note, my husband just reminded me to tell you that I have about 12 ducks right now that have hatched in the incubator, which is about 10 feet away from me. They're silver appleyards, and one goose. So I'm very excited. The goose is the watchdog of the flock. So anyway, and ducks is one really great example of permaculture, because we use our yard debris, we put it in their run, they walk on it, it absorbs things, it helps to balance the elements in the coop, not make it too mucky. Then after time, we harvest it and we put it on our flower beds. So we're not wasting anything. Even the shavings from the coops we use to mulch our flower beds, and not flower beds, but I mean everything, like every bed in our yard, all the fruits and what have you. And also, so the water from their pools, they need a lot of water, but if you hook up a hose when you're draining it, you can drain it right into any one of the places in your yard where you need water, and it's already fertilized by the ducks. So, we're not wasting that water either. We're trying to like bring it all in and, utilize the ducks for not only food with their eggs, but being part of our yard in such an integral way. So I guess I'll leave it there. Ultimately, social permaculture is about building healthier communities, like we're trying to do here with the Food Forest Initiative. I didn't know all of these people before we came together, and now I learn from every single one of them, and we're all moving towards a common goal. And I think that like the Harwich project is something that could be replicated on a larger level in many, many different places, because power lines everywhere are sort of like dead space. And there's so much we could do for food justice and economic justice and all of it. So that's my real focus with permaculture, and the Food Forest Initiative is trying to build those social aspects as well. Thank you. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Sturgis Library. Thank you, Rand.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. And we're going to move to, I'm confused. We have, okay, yes, sorry. To Clara McClarty and Sandy McClarty, who are in Harwich, live very near our Power Lines project. And Clara was very much involved in selecting the species for the restoration agriculture design that we did there. So I'm going to pass along to Clara.
Thank you, Rand. Hi, good job, everyone. My name's Clara. This is my messy kitchen. I wanted to be really down to earth and realistic with everyone. I have been living here at this house.
They can't hear us.
Oh yeah, turn on your sound, please.
It is on. Can you hear us?
Mute.
Hello?
Yep.
You're all good.
Give me a thumbs up. Okay, sorry. We've lived here almost 6 years.
Still need to unmute.
Rand says he
Okay,
can't hear me, but
we're
everyone
getting
else
a
can.
thumbs up from some people.
You're all good. Rand's volume's off.
Okay.
Okay. So I am maybe idealistic, dreamer, but I would love to say to you guys that I don't go to Stop and Shop anymore because I just harvest food from my yard. But it's not true. I really hope that someday I can say that and tell you how to do it. But I just wanted to put it out there. Sometimes I watch those documentaries like The Biggest Little Farm and all that stuff, and I just think, oh no, what am I doing wrong? How am I ever gonna, have those beautiful trees just dripping with fruit everywhere? But it really does take this rebuilding of a relationship. If the mess we're in as a culture is because we're disconnected. I grew up eating food from grocery stores, you know, it might have a picture of a red barn on it and a happy cow, but that wasn't really where it came from. And I didn't really know about it. I was pretty disconnected from most of what I ate. And since trying to restart that connection, I've had a lot of good stuff from my yard, like Tom and Kristen showed, but there's just this big learning curve. So I just wanted to say that give yourself space, be kind to yourself. It takes a lot of time, and it's like you're reforging a relationship because we're disconnected and we're reconnecting with plants, and we're making friends with these plants. So I just wanted to show you a few plants that I brought in from the garden that we eat in my family quite a bit of. Tonight we had hosta, and I dug up a chunk of it to show you. These were, I didn't even plant them, they were already in my yard. The previous owners had them here, and I learned from Dave and Marina that they were really good to eat. They're totally similar to asparagus for me. The flavor isn't exactly an asparagus flavor, but the texture, the size, the nice tender spring shoots, and you can cook them in those ways. You can saute them and put them in an omelet. You can put them in a quiche. You could just eat them plain with some garlic. Tonight we had it with some garlic and cream, and we put it over our rice. And you just get a knife, and you can cut down below the soil level to harvest these. Way down below there, it's all tender and good. And this is your beautiful little hosta shoot. These are native to Asia, where they cultivate them and eat them. And they grow here in shade, sun, dry conditions. I never water them. They're really awesome. They're totally one of the earliest things that you can harvest a bunch of in the spring. Like Dave mentioned, these perennial plants have an extensive root system, and they're really hardy. So once it warms up just a little bit, they start shooting out, and there's just tons of them. And they come back every year with absolutely no fertilizing, no fuss. Next one I have been eating lately is, move that down, Jerusalem artichokes. He mentioned the fartichoke and how they ferment them. Some people don't really have gassiness as much as others, and my family loves these. These roots right here are not, it's not the best time to eat them once they're sprouting, this little shoot, but we did eat some tonight, and they're still good. It's really a cool food that you can dig up and eat as soon as the ground thaws. So it could, this year the ground was hardly frozen at all. You could get them in February, March, all throughout. They taste like a potato texture, but with sort of artichoke inulin taste. The inulin starch is also in artichokes. So that's how they got that name. They're not related to artichokes. They are so easy to grow. They spread around. I bought from a nursery this type called white fuseau, which is a long tapered shaped root that doesn't have a whole bunch of knobs, so it's easier to scrub it. Some of them are like these really knobby tubers, and all the dirt is mushed down in, and that can take a long time. If you want to really roast a whole pan of them for your family, you have to scrub them and pull them apart a bit to get all that dirt off. So this white fuseau one is easier to clean. That's one of the, and it has a nice mild flavor. But anyways, these, I think I got like 3 little bits like this in the mail from a mail order nursery. And I put them in the ground with no improvements to the soil, and I had, you know, pans and pans and pans of these that I could roast and eat within a couple years. They're incredibly prolific, so you gotta be careful, but it's also really cool if you like them. And maybe you should try them first, because some people doesn't agree with their stomach. I got here some skirret, which Dave mentioned. I already pulled the harvestable roots off this one. Oh, here it is. Just starting to come out now with its leaves, so I could find it. And this is a very small one that I just started last year. So I got these seeds from Dave, and I started the seeds. They grew really easy. They're gonna take time. So this one was started last year, and these roots right here are the carrot-like roots that you can break off, cook, and harvest. Now, for this plant to be a perennial, obviously you're gonna have to put it back in the ground. This part here, this leaf, these stems with roots attached, you can replant and wait a couple more years and they'll make another big clump. The clump in Dave's picture was like, you know, bigger than my head with tons of these stringy roots. And those are really great to just roast, saute, anything you would do with parsnips or carrots. I also have here a couple parsnips. Parsnips are biennial, not perennial truly, but they grow like perennials because they, I think they're in here. That's fennel. I got another bucket. Because they self-sow, so they'll grow 1 year and then set seeds and they'll just come up everywhere, and you can pull those up in the winter or the really early spring too. Here's a nice one. This parsnip root grew itself. I planted them once. I left some in the ground for 2 years so that they would flower. And when they set seeds, those seeds went everywhere. They're all under my elderberries, under my blackberries, in some other beds. And I see the leaves coming up in the spring, just pull on it, and there's your nice big fat parsnip. I use these a lot, the walking onion. It's a top-setting onion. So I bought some of these through a mail order source like eBay or something. And they sent me a few tiny little onion bulb looking things, and I planted those in like February. And they grew into these big papery onions. And when the onion flowers, it's not really a flower, it's top-setting bulbs. So they're these little tiny baby onions up on top of the plant. And then eventually the weight of them as they mature causes it to fall over, and they root there and grow another clump. So these are awesome to eat right now. And for the whole last month, the greens, like a green onion, just pull them. They're abundant, they're prolific, they're everywhere. You don't feel bad, you can just take handfuls of them out, and there'll always be more. In the fall, you can use the actual bulb onion at the base. It will be much bigger than what you see here. This has taken all the energy out of the bulb to make the growth. And then in the middle of summer, there's those little top ones, and you can grab those. You have to peel them, they're small. But when you need onions for a salad or something, they're great to use. The Turkish rocket, which is a broccoli relative, I've got one right here. They're just starting to come out with their leaf clump. This little plant will become like an 18-inch wide, enormous mound of these little tiny broccolis within a few weeks from now, I think. They're just starting to, the leaves are just growing a lot, and when those little flower buds form, those little broccolis, they're really, really awesome. They're totally prolific. There's heaps and heaps of them. You could freeze them and save them for later. They just give you a whole bunch of food that you don't work hard to produce. They're useful, and the bronze fennel. I got one of those here too. It's starting to come up for the last few weeks. These are not as big as the bulbing fennel that you'll see at the supermarket, the big white bulbs type. It's called Florence fennel. This fennel, though, grows itself, grows in my driveway in the gravel with no help and no encouragement. It's everywhere, and I could take as much as I want, cut them down at the base, and saute these fennel fronds right now. They're tender. They're really good. They taste a lot like the Florence fennel, just not so big and not so much of the bulb part. You can use them for tea. You can use the pollen in recipes, which has a lot of protein, I think, and other nutrients. And you can eat the flowers. We save the seeds. My kids love to just snack on the seeds. So those are the perennial plants that I brought in just to show you. I cooked some up too, but I don't think you need to see me eating them. And I was going to say a brief word about sourcing the plants. There are a lot of permaculture nurseries that are offering varieties you might not find if you just pick up the first catalog that comes in the mail. Like this Jerusalem artichoke that makes a longer, thinner, not knobby root. I got these from Oikos Tree Crops. Oikos is like, they sell all these amazing varieties of trees, fruits, shrubs, all kinds of perennial foods. And if you just look up Jerusalem artichokes on there or sunchokes, you would probably see 12 different types with all different traits to choose from. So when you're going to plant these perennial plants, take some time to consider what's important to you in the variety you choose, and even, you know, you're going to consider your local conditions, what's adapted to our hot, dry summers, sandy soil, damp winters, you know, the temperatures we get, the humid air, the diseases we have here, all those type of things. And trying to be fast, so I'm kind of just, I was going to list off some of these nurseries. That Oikos I mentioned, they have fruit trees, nut trees, and they do a lot from seed too. So they'll have a population of, say, hazelnuts, and they save seed from a specific population with specific traits. And you can buy those seedlings, and they're not clones. So there's a lot of reasons that you might want genetic diversity in your plantings, so that you can select the plants that are best suited to your conditions from a variety of plants, not a bunch of identical clones. Edible Landscapes of Cape Cod sells a bunch of perennials. Edible Landscaping of Virginia is a really cool nursery that has a lot of stuff. Triplebrook Farms in Massachusetts, they sell hardy kiwi, I know, and other things. Fedco is a nursery in Maine that has obviously very hardy, well-adapted stuff and a lot of heirloom apple trees and other things. For hazelnuts, for the Power Lines project, we used Forest Agriculture Enterprises and Z's Nutty Ridge. Those were two people who are breeding hazelnuts that are American hazelnuts, but they're hybrids with larger and more productive nut-bearing traits than the regular native hazelnut that you might find in the woods around here, which has very few nuts on it most of the time. And this really cool company, Experimental Farm Network, I don't know if it's even a company, they sell seeds and sometimes other plants that you would never find in most catalogs. Like they had a perennial kale Grex last year. Dave gave me some of them. So a Grex is a mixture. The parent plants of the seeds were not uniform. There was a diversity to the population, and someone was trying to breed two different types of brassica plants into a perennial kale for our climate, perennial in our climate. So you buy this mixture, and the idea is that you would grow a bunch of them and select out whichever ones were thriving in your garden, whichever ones were hardy in your winter, and you be able to create from that a population that meets the requirements you have in your garden. They also had like, I bought some special seeds from them for a Opuntia cactus. You know those cactuses that you can see on Cape Cod, low growing? This one was found in the mid-Atlantic, and it had exceptionally large, tasty fruit with very small seeds. So, you know, if you grow that one, you're not going to have exactly the mother plant. It's not a clone, but you're taking seed from this plant that had more desirable characteristics, and you're getting them started, and you're going to pick out which ones thrive for you, and maybe have a variety that's more useful. Multiplier onions, they had these bigger ones because they're really easy to grow, but they're kind of small and fiddly to peel. So you could get one population from a population that had larger onions. Just for some examples. So that's the Experimental Farm Network. If you go on their website, you'll learn a lot just by looking around. The other one is, yeah, okay. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I noticed one question in the chat wanting to source mushroom inoculant. And we mentioned wine cap mushrooms. Wine cap mushrooms seem to, and I learned this from Tom Fettig and Kristen, be able to grow on somewhat undifferentiated wood chips like you would get at the at the transfer station, chipped trees from the Cape Cod area. And yeah, so field and forest products. Field and forest is a source of the mushroom. You can get it in a sawdust inoculant, which I used last summer, and it worked wonderfully. I think I just want to mention that we have a work day coming this Saturday at Audubon Long Pasture Wildlife Sanctuary from noon to 5. If you come at noon, bring a bag lunch. We'll just have a circle and exchange news and ideas and catch up. And then we'll be planting different native, entirely native food plants in our demonstration forest garden there. So it'd be nice to meet you, and you have experience to share too. Now, any other questions? We have maybe a minute. I think we have to close out in about 2 minutes. And Corey's nodding there. Yeah, Field and Forest is the name for the mushroom inoculant. There are other companies too. Paul Stamets, who was mentioned earlier, has his own company. What is that called? Fungi Perfecti, I think, and they have other kinds of mushroom inoculant. But Field and Forest, based in Wisconsin, seems to be easiest to use for us. Any other thoughts from anybody else in the group? Yeah, this format is so odd. It would be nice to be able to see everybody and get your questions in a real direct way. That's more what we're all about. And so we hope to meet you in some other context. We will have a work day every third Thursday of each month, starting with this one at the Long Pasture Audubon Wildlife Sanctuary. The next one will probably be at our Harwich project outdoors, and we'll be checking in on the plants that we planted there. So we can learn about restoration agriculture from us there and share your ideas. So I thank everybody.